Support for Trifles comes from listeners like you, who support us through Patreon and Substack. Bonus material, thank you gifts, and more await at patreon.com/trifles and at trifles.substack.com. And now you can enjoy some Trifles swag, mugs, notepads, and oval stickers, available in our store. Find it at ihearofsherlock.com/merchandise.
Welcome to Trifles, a weekly podcast about the Sherlock Holmes stories.
It is, of course, a trifle, but there is nothing so important as trifles.
Yes, the band was speckled and there were 6 Napoleons, but there are so many other details to pick apart in the stories.
Pray, be precise as to details.
You know the plots, but what about the minutiae? Have you ever stopped to wonder about why Dr. Watson was called James by his wife? Or of Sherlock Holmes's dining habits? Or what happened when he let a criminal escape?
You are very inquisitive, Mr. Holmes.
It is my business to know what other people don't know.
Scott Monty and Bert Wolder will have the answers to these questions and more in Trifles.
The game's afoot.
Episode 494, Musgrave Musings. Hello there, and welcome to Trifles, the Sherlock Holmes podcast where we get into the minutiae in the Sherlock Holmes stories. I'm Scott Monty.
I'm Bert Wolder.
And Bert, have you mused very much today?
I have mused. I have a brand new muser, actually, that came, I think, from England. You plug it in. I had some problem, of course, because it was set for the higher voltage in England. But it works really well.
Oh, good.
And now the problem is that the music it produces is not really what you would expect. But you feed in, a little Beethoven and a little Bach and turn it on to blend. But I wound up with Alvin and the Chipmunks. I was very surprised.
As usual, you are amusing.
Not hardly.
Yeah, you are my muse of amusement. Well, this is Trifles, and we are back with another episode. This is one of those episodes where we take a piece of Sherlockian scholarship and share it with you. We try to pluck from someplace you normally can't find in your library shelves, in your local library, or readily available in the bookstore. And in this case, we are dipping into an old issue of the Baker Street Miscellanea, where we're going to be musing about Musgrave. More about that in just a moment. And meanwhile, we wanted to remind you that if you would like to support the show, it helps us to keep doing what we do. Well, obviously, there are costs associated with physically manually uploading and hosting all the files and everything we do electronically. Obviously, there is a bit of labor that goes into the show, but also to do the research, that mental labor that goes into it. We think we're slightly worth it. I don't know if we're worth a king's ransom, the way what was found in the basement of Burleston Manor, but we think we're worth at least $1 a month. And that's exactly what you can do over at Patreon. $1, $2, $3, $5 a month, whatever you would like to contribute. We have different tiers there for you to give. And we also have the option of $5 a month on Substack. And in either of these cases, you can do it annually as well as monthly. You can do it for a single month. You can do it for a couple of months. You make the call. But the bottom line is you get ad-free versions of the episodes. You get occasional bonus content, such as Trifling Trifles. We've got another one of those coming up in July. And you get the satisfaction of knowing that you support great Sherlockian content that helps to inform Sherlockians new and old and to bring new people into the fold. So thank you in advance. Okay, Bert, we promised people that we would be musing about Musgraves. This is Musgrave Musings. Who wrote this piece, and where could the intrepid Sherlockian find it if they went looking?
Well, you would find it in Baker Street Miscellany, which is a publication we've talked about several times, quite a remarkable publication. And it is in Baker Street Miscellany number 17, isn't that right?
That's right.
That's right. And it was written by E. Butler Richards. And I am very happy to say that after doing considerable amount of research, I have absolutely no idea who E. Butler Richards was. But he has written this essay. I'm presuming it's an E. Could be Eleanor Butler Richards, for all I know. And it's a really unique piece. And you'll see what's unique about it. And that's what I really enjoy about some of these discussions. Finding an author who treats the topic, activity in the world of Sherlock Holmes, a case of Sherlock Holmes, in a completely new and maybe slightly off-the-wall way. And E. Butler Richards begins by telling us, introducing this sort of note of suspicion, which is going to be amplified as the essay continues. It's well known that both Watson and the agent were not above a bit of mild appropriation, a little benign borrowing to meet the demands of publisher and public. We excuse the use of the mind-reading scene from the cardboard box in The Resident Patient as a simple desire to display the range of Holmes's deductive skills. And we agree that fact is stranger than fiction when we find Holmes involved in nearly 3 nearly identical cases: the Red-Headed League, the 3 Garridebs, and Stockbroker's Clerk. But it's more disturbing to learn of close similarities between canonical tales and secular fiction. But even here, we may remember Holmes's statement that there's a strong family resemblance among misdeeds. We might, however, be less inclined to believe that Holmes himself would be capable of such license, but this is precisely what I would like to suggest in these brief remarks on the Musgrave Ritual.
And Richards continues, among the cases recorded in the saga, there are many that tax our powers of belief. Even the sober commentator D. Martin Dakin relegates the Blanched Soldier, the Lion's Mane, the Mazarin Stone, the Three Gables, Creeping Man, a Resident Patient to the status of pseudepigrapha. This was in a Sherlockian commentary by Martin Dakin. Pseudepigrapha. And other critics would also add the Sussex Vampire. The grounds for rejecting these cases are often stylistic and literary, but occasionally we just simply don't like the picture of Holmes, which emerges. But the Musgrave Ritual is not so simple. It's written in the classic Watsonian style, and we're relieved to find a thoroughly mature detective in this young amateur. Rather, it is the facts in the Musgrave Ritual which are troublesome.
Now, what I should have said earlier is this observation that he's made about it's more disturbing to learn of close similarities between canonical tales and secular fiction has a footnote, and he refers to some articles from the Baker Street Journal about Daniel Defoe, Deptford, and Dr. Watson, about Conan Doyle's Adventure of the Creeping Man as Stevensonian analog, and a couple of other things here. So this E. Butler Richards is clearly a literary scholar of some sort. And I also really like that word that he dropped in here, pseudepigrapha. Do you know, if you come down with pseudepigrapha and you take a placebo, it'll go right away. But in any case, he continues, the complete catalog of improbabilities and outright impossibilities that this case presents is vast, and I will not record them all here. Suffice it to mention that the shape and dimensions of the manor house at Hurlston have long been a popular subject for debate, though every proposed solution seems to be a compromise between literature and imagination. Gary Wilson has recently commented on the many mysteries left unsolved in the case, and we may also wonder at coins which rust, the unbelievable stupidity of generations of Musgraves who could not imagine what the ritual was all about. The impossibility of Musgrave keeping the crown, the odd dismissal of Brunton, who couldn't have been nosier than any other butler, and so on. There's really only one hypothesis which will account for these and other outre elements in the story, to wit, that Musgrave is a pure fabrication. Well, not a pure fabrication. Below, I will suggest that it was borrowed from another canonical tale, one which we all know well.
But first, let's ask why Holmes would manufacture such a complex fiction. The answer lies in the circumstances in which it was concocted. Consider the opening of the story. The scene's a classic one, with the two friends seated comfortably by the fire on a winter's night in Baker Street. What is different here is the mess of papers littering the rooms, and Watson's suggestion that Holmes make the place a little more habitable. Clearly, Holmes brought up the subject of a Musgrave ritual only to avoid the rather bothersome chore of straightening up his clutter. And he wanted to divert Watson's domestic preoccupations with a mysterious, hinted-at case from his early days. Consider also the remarkable nature of the story and the remarkable opportunities it presented for Holmes to demonstrate his abilities. No crime is actually committed, and no crime is actually solved. The whole interest of the case lies in the interpretation of the ritual, the reconstruction of Brunton's death, and the discovery and identification of the crown. Far from being of shivering importance to his career, the Musgrave ritual is simply a showcase for Holmes's talents, precisely the kind of story his robust ego would manufacture. And, as we know from such cases as The Hound of the Baskervilles and The Dying Detective, Holmes was more than capable of a gentle tug on the poor doctor's leg.
Perhaps the best evidence that Musgrave is a flight of Holmes's creative fancy is its striking resemblance to another canonical tale. A synopsis of these stories should make the similarity immediately obvious. Both concern a man who searches for a hidden valuable object connected with the fate of a king. The object is in a house, and its location is eventually discovered by Holmes. However, its recovery is thwarted by a woman who had had an affair with the original seeker. She removes the object and flees to an unknown place of safety. Obviously, this is both Musgrave and Scandal in Bohemia, and described in these terms, the two are nearly identical.
Well, there are other telling similarities as well. The antagonist in each case is a person of musical accomplishment. Brunton is said to play every musical instrument. Irina Adler is a retired operatic soprano. The object in the Musgrave ritual, a crown, is associated with a king who lost his head. And the object in A Scandal in Bohemia, a photograph, associated with a king who also lost his head over Irene. In neither case is Holmes called upon to solve a crime, and in neither case does he unravel the mystery in time to prevent the loss of the photograph and the flight of Irene, or the death of Brunton and the flight of Rachel. In both cases, he locates the hidden object by a broadly theatrical charade. The crowd and the clergymen, the elaborate and unnecessary stepping out of the ritual. And finally, one suspects that Watson, if only unconsciously, recognized the great similarity between the stories when, in the Musgrave ritual, he referred to Holmes's natural bohemianism of disposition.
It's not hard to understand why Holmes might have used scandal as a model for Musgrave. No doubt Irene had left a strong enough impression that he would remember the case for the rest of his life. And it is hardly surprising that her story should be on his mind. Having raised and hopefully demonstrated the truth of the original hypothesis, I must confess it creates a wholly different kind of problem. To my knowledge, no attempts have been made to date the telling of Musgrave to Watson. According to the suggestion made here, it must have been told after Scandal in Bohemia took place, a date which has been reasonably fixed in March 1888. We may also recall that in Musgrave, Holmes refers to Watson as his biographer and mentions the collection of my trifling achievements and your annals which Watson had penned. Such statements would seem curiously out of place. Had Holmes told Watson Musgrave before Scandal in Bohemia took place, when only one adventure, Study in Scarlet, had been published?
The problem this raises is simply this, that while Watson is married in A Scandal in Bohemia, he appears to be living at 221B in the Musgrave Ritual. The Musgrave Ritual was published in May 1893 and thus must have been related to Watson, related to Watson before May 1891, when Holmes supposedly took the plunge at Reichenbach. In The Final Problem, Watson is still married. In short, the problem is that between A Scandal in Bohemia and The Final Problem, Watson was married, yet at some time during this period, he seems to have been living at 221B. I should emphasize that this problem remains, even if we were to reject my hypothesis about the authenticity of the Musgrave Ritual. We would still be faced with the problem reconciling Holmes's statements about biographers with Watson's marriage. In other words, if the Musgrave Ritual was told to Watson before A Scandal in Bohemia took place, and even before Watson married Mary Morstan, how could Holmes refer to Watson as his biographer, etc., when absolutely nothing had been published?
At this point, it's tempting to cop out. Solving one mystery should be enough for a brief paper, yet possible answers can be raised. Perhaps Watson was visiting Holmes during one of Mary's frequent journeys. Perhaps Watson was in fact only paying a social call that evening. In either case, he was presuming upon his guestship to complain about the slovenly rooms. But we may have no other choice than to conclude that married life had begun to leave its domestic imprint. I'm afraid that this must remain one of the great unsolved mysteries of the canon.
As a final note, it is worth remarking that even those readers who have not been convinced by my argument must nonetheless recognize the uncanny resemblance between A Scandal in Bohemia and the Musgrave Ritual. At the very least, we may say that history repeats itself, and apparently did a number of times in Holmes's career. The association of objects with kings is one of those significant threads in the canon. To A Scandal in Bohemia and the Musgrave Ritual, we might also add the beryl coronet. For in that adventure, too, Holmes is called upon to locate a royal crown hidden in a house. In that case, a love-struck woman once again flees as the result of its theft. As Holmes himself noted, there is nothing new under the sun. Well, what do you think? Are you convinced by E. Butler Richards?
No, I think it's balderdash.
Oh,
I
goodness.
mean, the problem there is that that huge generalization about a woman being involved in seeking an object, and there's a king, and it's practically useless. I mean, the fact is that the Musgrave ritual involves, as we've discussed in other episodes, entombment. It's very Gothic. We have a reprehensible character in Brunton, who's very intellectual but pays little attention to the feelings of the people around him. We do have a crime. I mean, he is left to asphyxiate. That doesn't seem like something, a Scotland Yarder would say, oh, well, happens all the time, And it has a set of remarkable deductions that translate this age-old ritual into something understandable. And, that is, I think makes it very difficult to waive. I mean, I understand why E. Butler Richards did that, because it's what I like to call the fast shuffle. If pay no attention to my fingers, where's the cards? If you do the fast shuffle on this and point out this is a similarity and that's a similarity, at some level people will say, well, okay, I guess so. But nah.
Well, makes sense. Well, you may be interested to know that I was able to find a mention of E. Butler Richards online to help us fill out this character, not necessarily three-dimensionally, but to give us a sense. And the only reliable reference I can find is on the Internet Movie Database. E. Butler Richards is listed as an actor, and his single credit is as an uncredited zombie in Dawn of the Dead.
Well, and that, boy, oh boy, that's just a trifle.
It is, of course, a trifle, but there is nothing so important as trifles.
Please join us again next week for another installment of Trifles. Show notes are available on SherlockHolmesPodcast.com. Please subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts and be sure to check out our longer show, I Hear of Sherlock Everywhere, where we interview notable Sherlockians and share news of the Sherlockian world.
You've taken my breath away, Mr. Holmes.
So, I have decided to devote my weekend to the collating of some of my early work. Your early work? Before my biographer came to glorify me.
You mean you have records of your early work?